Hello and good evening. You're watching AWANI Tonight with me, Farhana Sheikh. Global Equine Services and Business Holdings has denied claims that children in its welfare homes were sodomized or forced to sexually assault others. This comes after police rescued 402 children from 20 welfare homes in Selangor and Negeri Sembilan, allegedly linked to the company. Global Equine said the claims were defamatory and that it was prepared to cooperate with authorities to resolve the matter. Inspector General of Police Tan Sri Razaruddin Hussein said the victims, aged between 1 and 17, had been subjected to various forms of abuse, with some forced to perform sexual acts on other children. They were also punished with heated metal objects, and those who fell ill were allegedly not allowed to seek medical attention until they were in critical condition. Razaruddin said preliminary investigations revealed that the children were not orphans, as many had been placed in these homes by their parents as infants and subjected to indoctrination under the guise of religious education. Police arrested 171 suspects, including religious teachers and caretakers, and they have been remanded for 7 days. Police are also looking into whether the welfare homes are registered, adding that the 20 premises raided have been closed. Meanwhile, the children will be temporarily housed at the Kuala Lumpur Police Training Centre and will undergo health checks. The case is being investigated under several laws, including the Child Act 2001 and the Sexual Offences Against Children Act 2017. Matters related to Islam, including the proposed mandatory halal certification for eateries, come under the purview of the Conference of Rulers. Deputy Prime Minister Dato' Sri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi says while a full report on the proposal is being drawn up, the views and wisdom of the Conference of Rulers would be sought before a decision be made whether to implement it or otherwise.
Zahid stressed that the matter should not be turned into a polemic, as no decision has been made over the mandatory halal certification for eateries. Prime Minister Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim on Wednesday instructed Religious Affairs Minister Dato' Muhammad Naim Mukhtar to prepare a full report on the proposal to be presented to the Cabinet for review next week. Last week, Muhammad Naim reportedly said several laws need to be amended to enforce mandatory halal certification for food outlets, and various agencies would need to be involved to ensure compliance. The proposed move requiring all eateries that do not serve pork or alcohol to obtain halal certification has caused an uproar among politicians and communities.
The contributions of Felda's early settlers must never be forgotten, says Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim. The Prime Minister praised the pioneers for their unwavering resilience in clearing vast jungles to establish Felda settlements, saying that their efforts were no small feat.
Dan peneroka, kita juga tak boleh lupa. Kerana peringkat awal dia datangkan macam ini. Bukan ada jalan, sekolah, padang, kemudahan-kemudahan. Belum ada. Dia masuk lawan, bersihkan hutan belantara. Ini dia jasa bapa-bapa, ibu-ibu yang menjadi pengasas peneroka awal. Jadi kita hormat, terima kasih kepada mereka.
Anwar also paid tribute to former Prime Minister Tun Abdul Razak Hussein, whose vision for Felda helped lift many from poverty. He was speaking at the launch of the Segalanya Felda Carnival in Felda Sahabat, Sabah earlier today. There, he also addressed the issue of returning the native customary rights land in Tambesan to their rightful owners, adding that discussion will take place between the federal and state governments and Felda. In other news, TikTok user Abang Bas faces a new charge of posting offensive comments about a 9-year-old child on the platform. 24-year-old Muhammad Nur Hadim Sari was charged in the Sessions Court earlier today and pleaded not guilty. The accused had used his TikTok account to post derogatory comments on a video of the child, referring to her as his crush. He was charged under Section 2331A of the Communications and Multimedia Act, which carries a fine of up to 50,000 ringgit, imprisonment for up to 1 year or both. The court allowed the accused to be released on bail of 10,000 ringgit with one surety and fixed October 10th for the next case mentioned. It also imposed conditions that Muhammad Nurhadi must report to the nearest police station at the beginning of each month and not contact the victim until the case is resolved. He was previously charged last week with physical sexual assault and repeatedly watching a child for sexual purposes, to which he also pleaded not guilty. The recent issue involving TikTok user Abang Bas has raised concerns over the growing trend of minors being featured in social media content without their consent. Kaiser Ho from Monsters Among Us discusses the problematic nature of exposing children to such privacy violations.
The fact that most of these contents are generated without recognition of harm, one, and also there's insufficient support to the children who have been harmed as well. Because we know that with social media, it has always been a cornerstone of children who have been born to this era. But even as it permeates towards their life, their school, education, or even connections, there's not sufficient protections in general or support when they do face instances like this. So I think that's the problematic thing, the TikTok rapid circulation culture and the lack of institutions that are able to take it down or provide support to those affected.
Commenting on cases such as Abang Bas, Kaiser noted the potential long-term psychological impacts it could have on children, especially when their rights and agency are ignored.
The extent of what he was recording, what kind of framing and narratives he was doing, the sexual harassment and the objectification and sexualization of children, those are the things that are not necessarily informed to either parents or the children that are involved themselves. And I think that comes back into adult supremacist culture of thinking it's completely okay to use children as fodder to kind of to boost their social media impact, their social media milestones, without true regard into how the child is affected. Because when you look into how children navigate their lives, these things are digital footprints that cannot be erased, and let alone that is not informed by their consent, and they don't actually know how it's going to be circulated, to which demographics, to which groups. I think that causes a lot of harm, because children will feel like there is no rights. They have no rights, because if adults do not treat them with rights, why should they then believe that they have rights? And that definitely suppresses their ability to recognize harm and also lean into agency, to really feel like their voice matters in how things are circulated and their choice matters.
Kaiser also outlined measures to effectively protect our children from being further exploited and sexualized on online platforms.
So on a legislative level, definitely there needs to be more consultative efforts with children about their lived experiences on the internet, in terms of being able to inform that into, again, law and policy of what is safeguarding them, and also not making it such a black and white and very outdated version of what it means to use the internet and the kind of harm that can be experienced through the internet. Complaint mechanism, basically make it less bureaucratic and more accessible and more sensitized with the current context, because similar to gender-based violence, even adults face issues when it comes to online gender-based violence and the ability to report it and the ability to get recourse, let alone that of children who might not have a lot of resources in terms of stepping into their own agency, and then the social stigma that comes with it as well. So on a complaint mechanism, that has to be addressed in terms of making it more child-friendly and child-centered.
We'll go for a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. South Korea has declared a special emergency medical response for 2 weeks in September. It will use all available resources to ensure services continue, as a strike by young doctors puts increasing strain on the country's medical system. The government said it would temporarily increase the fees doctors receive from health insurers around a national holiday next week. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said the move was to reward the medical profession for its efforts. A recent spike in COVID-19 cases has also threatened to overwhelm the country's hospitals. The Health Ministry announced last week that it was deploying military doctors to help in some hospital emergency rooms due to a shortage of medical staff. South Korea's parliament also recently passed a bill allowing nurses to perform some medical procedures normally carried out by doctors amid the nationwide walkout. Meanwhile, Australia introduced a bill to fine internet platforms up to 5% of their global revenue for failing to prevent the spread of misinformation online. Communications Minister Michelle Rowland says the country would make tech platforms set codes of conduct governing how they stop dangerous falsehoods spreading to be approved by a regulator.
He said the regulator would set its own standard if a platform failed to do so, then fine companies for non-compliance.
This bill ensures that digital platforms are accountable for combating mis- and disinformation on their services. The top priority of the government is to keep its citizens safe.
The legislation introduced in Parliament on Thursday targets false content that hurts election integrity or public health, calls for denouncing a group or injuring a person, or risk disrupting key infrastructure or emergency services. The bill is part of a wide-ranging regulatory crackdown by Australia, which comes ahead of an election due within a year.
Hamas says its negotiators reiterated its readiness to implement an immediate ceasefire with Israel in Gaza, based on a previous U.S. proposal without new conditions. The Palestinian group's negotiation team had met mediators in Doha to discuss the latest developments in Gaza.
Talks have so far failed to reach a deal to end the 11-month-old war. Lingering issues include control of the Philadelphia corridor, a narrow stretch of land on Gaza's border with Egypt persisting. Chief U.S. negotiator on Gaza said on Saturday that a more detailed ceasefire proposal would be made in the next several days. The previous proposal, put forward by U.S. President Joe Biden in June, laid out a three-phase ceasefire in return for the release of Israeli hostages. Israel's genocide has killed over 41,000 Palestinians and wounded more than 95,000 others since October 7, 2023.
In other news, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that his government is working on a 10-year plan to fix the National Health Service. This comes after an independent report found the system to be in critical condition. According to the report, ballooning state-run NHS waiting times and delays getting vital treatment and cancer care is harming health and costing lives. The review found that the NHS is still struggling from the effects of the pandemic, weakened by underinvestment and missing key targets for treatment. Starmer's government had vowed to turn the NHS around, but the Conservatives said the government needed to turn rhetoric to action after scrapping its plans to reform social care and build new hospitals. Starmer's government is responsible for the NHS in England, but responsibility for the service in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are devolved. That wraps up AWANI tonight. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching.